There are moments in life when silence feels louder than any spoken word. When a glance, a hesitation, or a shift in energy tells you more than 1,000 explanations ever could. Betrayal has a way of hiding in the smallest of details, wrapping itself in laughter, in reassurances, in routine conversations that seem harmless on the surface. But beneath those words, something feels off, something feels unsteady. And deep down, intuition begins to whisper the truth you don't want to hear. When loyalty is broken, the first thing that changes isn't always the actions. It's the atmosphere. It's the way presence turns into absence, even when the body is still in the room. It's the way eyes don't hold contact as long as they used to. It's the way phones suddenly need to be face down on tables, locked tighter than before, carried even into the smallest corners where they once belonged. These changes don't scream, they whisper. But the whispers are constant, and when you pay attention they become deafening. What people often forget is this: lies demand energy, deception is exhausting. To carry on an affair, to juggle two versions of reality, to live one life by day and another in hidden hours. This is not sustainable without cracks forming. And those cracks reveal themselves in behavior, in speech, and in the small inconsistencies that cannot be permanently concealed. A cheating partner may believe they are clever, but no lie is perfect. No performance lasts forever. Truth has a way of leaking out through the smallest gaps. And once you've noticed those leaks, you can no longer unsee them. But here lies the power. Most people confronted with betrayal stumble because they ask weak questions. They plead, they cry, they demand answers in ways that give the guilty room to deny, to spin, to manipulate. Yet there is another way. There are words that don't ask. They declare, phrases that don't beg for honesty. They drag it out, sentences so sharp they cut through excuses and force the guilty to feel cornered, exposed, and powerless. Imagine this for a moment. Someone who has been lying, weaving stories, and hiding truths suddenly hears a phrase that shakes their confidence, a phrase that makes their stomach twist, their pulse quicken, and their carefully rehearsed lines crumble before they even speak. That is the power of language. That is the force of direct confrontation. And when used with precision, these phrases don't just raise suspicion, they make guilt unbearable. The truth is, fear makes people confess. Not fear of punishment, but fear of exposure. A guilty heart doesn't panic because of what it's done. It panics because it knows it's about to be caught. And when the right words are spoken, the walls they've built around their secrets start closing in on them. They begin to realize there is no safe space left to hide. No story convincing enough to cover the reality that is already coming to light. Think of betrayal like a house of cards. At first it looks steady, carefully built, almost impressive in its deception. But it only takes one touch, one precise movement, one carefully chosen phrase to make the entire structure collapse in an instant. That is exactly what these 7 phrases do. They don't shout, they don't rage, they don't chase. Instead, they strike with surgical precision. They hit the mind where it is weakest: fear, doubt, and panic. When betrayal lives in the shadows, it believes it has power. But once dragged into the open, it withers. Lies cannot survive in the light of truth. And these phrases are like spotlights illuminating the hidden corners, leaving no room for darkness, no space for excuses. That is why they are so effective. They bypass the surface and go straight to the core, shaking the guilty until they either break in silence or break in confession. So understand this: words are not just communication. Words are weapons. Words are keys. Words are mirrors that reflect what someone has desperately tried to hide. And when you choose the right words, when you deliver them with calm certainty, you will see the mask of confidence slip. You will see panic in the eyes, and you will hear the tremor in their voice because deep down they already know. Secrets cannot remain buried forever. Today you will learn the 7 phrases that ignite this fear, 7 sentences that pierce through deception like lightning splitting the sky. These are not ordinary words. They are deliberate, sharp, and precise. They don't chase lies. They force them to collapse. And once you understand their power, You will never again stumble blindly in the face of betrayal. You will stand firm, armed with the kind of language that brings the hidden into the light. Because in the end, betrayal may be painful, but ignorance is worse. And when you know how to strip away deception, when you know how to confront dishonesty with the power of carefully chosen words, you no longer stand as the victim of someone's lies. You stand as the force that ends them. The first phrase is deceptively simple, yet it carries more weight than hours of questioning. I already know the truth. These 5 words are a storm disguised as calm. They don't ask, they don't accuse, they don't leave space for debate. Instead, they strike with the quiet authority of certainty, and nothing terrifies a guilty mind more than the feeling that its carefully crafted lies have already been exposed. Think about what happens inside the mind of someone who has betrayed you. They rehearse stories. They build walls of explanations and justifications. They create entire scripts in their head, ready to defend themselves at the slightest suspicion. But when those words are met not with questions, not with pleading, but with a declaration of knowledge, the script collapses. Suddenly, they are not defending against your curiosity. They are defending against your certainty. That shift is everything. Why does this phrase work so powerfully? Because guilt thrives on doubt. As long as they believe you are unsure, they feel they can control the narrative. They think they can sprinkle lies like breadcrumbs and lead you away from the truth. But the moment you declare that you already know, you strip them of that control. They can no longer guide the story. The story in their mind has already been revealed. And in that moment, panic begins to set in. Their heart races. Their thoughts scatter. They ask themselves, what exactly does he know? Did someone see me? Did I leave a trace? Did my phone give me away? Was my absence noticed? 1,000 questions flood their mind, not because of what you said, but because of the uncertainty of what you might have discovered. That uncertainty is unbearable. It eats away at composure. It shakes confidence, and it often pushes the guilty closer to confession than any direct interrogation ever could. Understand this truth. A guilty person isn't afraid of what they've done. They are afraid of being found out. Exposure is their greatest fear, and this phrase plants the seed that exposure has already happened. That's why it pierces so deeply. But there's another layer of brilliance in these words. Notice what they don't do. They don't accuse directly. They don't specify. They don't lock you into one version of events. By keeping the phrase open, you leave room for their imagination to betray them. They will begin to project their own guilt into the silence. They will wonder how much you've seen, how much you've heard, how much proof you hold. And in that wondering, they often reveal more than you ever asked for. It's not uncommon for someone confronted with, "I already know the truth," to respond defensively, blurting out explanations before you've even demanded them. This is where you must remain steady. The power lies in silence after the phrase, "Speak it." Then let them wrestle with the weight of it. Do not rush to fill the gap. Do not rush to explain yourself. Let them feel the full gravity of being cornered without knowing what you truly hold in your hand. That silence is more frightening than any raised voice. Psychologically, this works because humans fear the unknown more than they fear the known. If you accuse with specifics, "I think you were with someone last night," they can deny, deflect, and cover. But when you declare knowledge without detail, their mind scrambles through every possible scenario, searching for what you might have discovered. In that scramble, cracks open, panic grows, the mask begins to slip. And here's the most important point. When you use this phrase, you claim the position of strength. Betrayal tries to put you in a place of weakness, making you question yourself, making you doubt your intuition, making you beg for answers. But when you say, "I already know the truth," you flip the power dynamic. You remind them that you are not blind, that you are not powerless, that you cannot be endlessly manipulated. That reminder alone shakes the guilty to their core. So remember, directness doesn't mean shouting. It doesn't mean anger. It means clarity. It means authority. It means speaking words that allow no escape routes. This phrase does exactly that. It closes the door they plan to slip through. It locks the windows they thought they could crawl out of, and it leaves them with only one option to face the truth they've been trying so desperately to hide. I already know the truth. 5 words, no emotion, no begging, just certainty. And in the heart of the guilty, certainty is the sharpest weapon you can wield. Second phrase is even more devastating because it takes away the one weapon a guilty person clings to: vagueness. It is this: I want you to tell me everything from the beginning. At first glance it may seem like a request, but it is not a request. It is a command. It is not open-ended. It is deliberate. This phrase does not allow half-truths. It does not permit own-line excuses. It does not give space for a vague denial. Instead, it demands detail. And detail is where liars stumble. A cheating heart thrives on fragments. They hide behind selective stories, offering just enough to keep suspicion quiet, but never enough to give clarity. They are comfortable dealing in pieces. An explanation here, an excuse there, a distraction somewhere else. But when confronted with a demand for everything, their comfort dissolves, because everything requires consistency. Everything requires memory. And when deception is built on lies, consistency collapses under the weight of scrutiny. Why does this phrase strike so hard? Because it doesn't let them wriggle away into the safety of nothing happened or you're imagining things. Instead, it corners them into a narrative. It forces them to construct a beginning, a middle, and an end. And in doing so, their own story becomes the trap. The more they speak, the more chances they have to contradict themselves, to forget a detail, to reveal something that doesn't align with reality. Their own words become their undoing. Think about the psychology at play here. When someone is guilty, silence is their shield. They want to speak as little as possible because silence leaves less room for mistakes. But this phrase rips that shield away. It doesn't let them offer one sentence. It doesn't let them escape into quiet denial. It demands a story. And when a guilty person is forced to tell a story, panic rises. Their heartbeat quickens. Their breathing shifts. Their eyes dart as they try to recall lies they've told before. But lies, unlike truth, are heavy. They require energy to maintain. They require rehearsals, mental notes, timelines that must always match. And no one can keep a false story perfect forever. This is why tell me everything from the beginning is so effective. It drags the guilty into unfamiliar territory. They may have prepared a short defense, but they have not prepared a confession disguised as a narrative, and in their struggle to speak, the cracks widen. They either become evasive, which exposes them, or they try to comply, and in their details the truth begins to leak out. But the true power of this phrase lies not just in the demand, but in what follows. Silence. Speak the words, then wait. Do not rush them. Do not guide them. Do not fill the silence with your own thoughts. The pause is what makes this phrase burn into their mind, because the longer the silence stretches, the louder their guilt echoes in their own head. They begin to feel the weight of your expectation. They realize there is no safe answer that can satisfy the gravity of what you've just demanded. And under that pressure, even the strongest liars falter. It is in that silence that panic grows. Their mind scrambles to find a way out, but every second of delay betrays them further. Every hesitation feels like an admission. Every stutter is magnified. And when they finally speak, their words come out shaky, their voice betraying what their lips try to conceal. This is not accidental. It is psychological warfare. By demanding everything, you transform the battlefield. No longer are they defending against a suspicion. They are forced to defend against an invisible wall that demands the whole truth, and the guilty are terrified of the whole truth. They can handle fragments, but not entirety. So remember, this phrase is not about anger. It is about authority. It is about stripping away the safety of excuses and forcing a guilty person into the dangerous territory of detail. It is about making them realize that the only way out is through, and that through leads directly to the very truth they've been hiding. Say it slowly, Say it clearly and then stop. Let silence do the rest. The combination of the phrase and the pause will echo in their chest like thunder after lightning. And in that echo, fear will take root. Fear of exposure, fear of contradictions, fear of the truth collapsing on top of them. I want you to tell me everything from the beginning. 7 words that remove the shadows they hide in. 7 words that demand a story they cannot hold together. 7 words that turn silence into their greatest enemy. And when silence becomes unbearable, that is when confessions are born. Third phrase is one that doesn't just corner the guilty in the present. It forces them to stare into the future. The words are these: I need to know if I'm wasting my life on a lie. This sentence is not about anger. It is not about rage or accusation. It is about clarity. And clarity is something the guilty fear the most, because clarity exposes what deception tries to cover. These words don't just question what has been done. They place the weight of an entire future on the truth. They shift the focus from the moment of betrayal to the reality of what that betrayal means. When these words are spoken, they strike deeper than suspicion. They strike at permanence. They remind the guilty that every lie told is not just about now. It's about tomorrow, next year, and every day that follows. And suddenly, their secret doesn't just look like a mistake. It looks like the slow death of trust, the erosion of the bond that was supposed to last. That realization brings fear because panic is not just born from being caught. It's born from seeing what will be lost once the truth surfaces. Psychologically, this phrase works because it reframes the conversation. Most people try to catch lies by digging into details. Where were you? What were you doing? Who were you with? But this statement bypasses the surface entirely. It doesn't get stuck in the weeds of excuses. Instead, it pulls the guilty into a bigger, scarier question. Does this relationship still have a foundation at all? That question cannot be brushed away with a casual denial. It demands an answer of substance, and liars are rarely equipped to provide one. And here's the brilliance. It removes power from the guilty. Usually when betrayal is uncovered, the cheater feels as if they are still in control. They think they can confess a little, deny a little, and manipulate the balance in their favor. But when you say, I need to know if I'm wasting my life on a lie, you seize control. You place the future in your own hands. You remind them that this is not just about their secrets. It's about your time, your energy, your life. And if they cannot provide the truth, you are declaring that you are willing to walk away from the lie. That terrifies them because now they're not just hiding from exposure, they're staring at the possibility of losing you forever. Notice also the emotional weight of the word life. Not hours, not days, not months. Life. When that word lands, it magnifies the stakes. It makes their betrayal feel bigger than just a mistake. It makes it feel like a theft of years, of trust, of loyalty, and that weight becomes unbearable. They panic because now they see the cost, not just in what they did, but in what they risk losing, and there is more. This phrase forces self-reflection. A guilty partner may have managed to rationalize their actions to themselves, telling lies like, it didn't mean anything, or it was just a moment. But when confronted with the possibility that their choices have turned an entire relationship into a lie, those rationalizations begin to shatter. They can no longer comfort themselves with excuses. They must face the reality that their deception carries consequences beyond their control. This phrase doesn't invite argument. It doesn't invite petty denial, because how can someone look at you and say, no, you're not wasting your life without feeling the weight of whether that's actually true? That contradiction tears at them. Their mind races not just to cover the past, but to protect the fragile pieces of the future they now realize could vanish in a heartbeat. And in that fear, panic grows. So remember, when you say these words, you are not only challenging their actions, you are challenging their very ability to give you what you deserve. You are setting a standard, drawing a line that says, my life is too valuable to be spent in deception. And that standard forces the guilty to confront a truth they cannot manipulate. Either confess and face consequences or continue lying and risk losing everything. I need to know if I'm wasting my life on a lie. This is not just a phrase, it is a mirror that forces the guilty to look at themselves and see the destruction they are causing. And when faced with that reflection, most liars feel the ground slipping beneath their feet. Their composure breaks, their defenses weaken, and often their confessions spill out. Not because you demanded them, but because the weight of silence after these words becomes too much to bear. Fourth phrase cuts through the false calm that cheaters try so desperately to maintain. It is this: your behavior has already told me more than your words ever could. These words land like a hammer because they expose the truth that actions cannot hide. Liars rely on words as their shield. They build explanations, they craft stories, they twist language to protect themselves. But when you declare that behavior has already spoken louder than words, you dismantle that shield. You remind them that it doesn't matter what excuse they prepare because the truth has already been revealed in the way they've acted. Here's the psychology. Deception requires performance. A guilty person knows they cannot let their actions align with their secret. So, they work to appear normal. They smile when they don't feel it. They force conversations. They show affection in ways that feel rehearsed, not real. And yet, no performance is flawless. Micro-expressions, changes in routine, inconsistencies in stories. These are the cracks. And once someone begins to notice the cracks, the performance unravels. That is why this phrase terrifies them. It tells them you've been watching. It tells them you've been paying attention to what they do, not just what they say. And worse, it tells them that their lies are no longer enough to protect them. The very thing they rely on, their words, have lost their power. That realization makes them panic because they know once actions are recognized, lies can no longer cover them. Think about the weight of that statement. Your behavior has already told me more than your words ever could. It leaves no space for argument. They cannot deny their own behavior. They cannot erase what has already been seen, already been felt. It's not an accusation, it's an observation. And observations are harder to fight against. They can deny words, but how can they deny their sudden secrecy with a phone? How can they deny the unexplained distance, the emotional withdrawal, the inconsistencies that stack higher every day? This phrase flips the dynamic. Normally, when lies are told, the guilty feels in control. They think they are one step ahead, feeding enough words to maintain the illusion. But when you say this, you seize control. You make it clear that their performance has failed, that you are not blind, and that the evidence is not in their stories, it's in their actions. That loss of control makes them unravel. And here's the subtle brilliance. This phrase forces them to question themselves. They begin to wonder, what exactly did I reveal? What did they notice? What detail gave me away? Their mind spirals through every interaction, every slip, every mistake. That spiral is where panic breeds because they know that if you've already seen the truth in their behavior, there may be nothing left for them to hide behind. The guilty may try to respond with defensiveness. What do you mean? What behavior? But even that question betrays them. The very need to demand clarification shows their anxiety. If they were truly innocent, they would not fear the implication. Yet guilt makes them desperate to know how much you've observed. And in that desperation, their mask begins to crack further. Remember, this behavior never lies for long. Words can be manipulated, stories can be polished, but actions over time always reveal the truth. That's why this phrase is so powerful. It tells them you've seen through the mask, you've connected the dots, and you no longer need their words to validate what you already feel. The silence after this phrase is equally powerful. Once spoken, let the weight of it linger. Do not rush into details. Do not list the behaviors you've noticed. Allow them to sit in the discomfort of knowing their actions have betrayed them. That silence forces them to confront the truth internally. And in that confrontation, fear grows stronger than any accusation could.